The air in the law office was still and cool, carrying the scent of lemon polish and aging paper. Alex sat with his hands loosely folded on the polished oak, watching a dust mote spiral in a thin beam of afternoon light. He was 28, but in this room, waiting for the final word of the man who had raised him, he felt the old, quiet hollowness of 13. It was a familiar space, this internal silence. His uncle had taught him how to live within it, not to fear it. The door opened, and his mother walked in. Lydia wore a tailored charcoal suit, her hair a perfect sweep of silver blonde. Her perfume arrived a moment before she did, something floral and expensive that clawed at the calm, sanitized air. She embraced him. It was a brief, efficient press of cheekbones, more a transfer of scent than affection. "Alex," she said, her voice a careful modulation of sorrow. "This is so hard, but we'll get through it together." For David, she sat, her eyes already cataloging the room, the leather chairs, the built-in bookcases, the obvious, quiet wealth. She spoke of grief, but her words felt rehearsed, a eulogy for an audience of one. He was such a rock, she said, and Alex remembered his first night in this city, the terrifying silence of his uncle's guest room, and the glass of milk placed wordlessly on his nightstand.
A rock, yes.
"I've been thinking about the estate," Lydia continued, smoothing her skirt. The charitable angle David would have wanted. "There's a foundation I'm involved with that could do such good with an endowment." Her plans unfolded, detailed and presumptive, filling the room with a future she was already furnishing. Mr. Grayson, the lawyer, entered with a solemn nod. He was a man of precise movements, carrying a single, thick folio. Lydia leaned forward, a current of anticipation animating her. As Grayson began his formal preamble, she interrupted, her voice layering over his. "We appreciate your diligence, Mr. Grayson. Of course, the family will need time to review everything before any disbursements. I'd imagine the liquidity event alone will take. Mr. Grayson is ready to begin, Mom." Alex's voice was not loud. It was flat, clear, a stone dropped into a still pond. It wasn't a challenge, it was a correction, a re-establishment of order. Lydia's sentence hung unfinished. She blinked, a flicker of annoyance followed by a sharper reassessment as she looked at her son. The professional mask of the lawyer twitched, a faint horror in his eyes as he realized the dynamic he'd walked into. The authority in the room had quietly, definitively shifted seats. Grayson cleared his throat, opened the folio. The paper crackled in the silence. "The last will and testament of David Arthur Reed." He read, his voice found its grounding in the legalese. "Article 1, I give, devise, and bequeath the entirety of my estate, both real and personal property, of whatever kind and wherever situated, to my nephew Alexander James Reed, who arrived at my door with one suitcase and a silence I spent 15 years learning to understand. This I leave to him in trust and in fee simple to be his absolutely." The words were a vault door closing. Absolute, unadorned. Alex felt them not as a surge of victory, but as a profound, almost crushing weight of recognition. His uncle had seen the hollowed-out boy and had named him heir to a world. Lydia made a small, sharp sound, like a gasp cut short. The color did not drain from her face so much as it tightened, drawing her features into a mask of bewildered calculation. Her eyes flew to Alex, but he was looking at the dust mote, now vanished. Grayson turned a page. His Adam's apple bobbed. Article 2, a separate directive for Lydia Marie Reed. He paused, the professional horror now fully present, realizing he was the instrument of a calibrated, posthumous reckoning. "I bequeath to Lydia Reed the proceeds of the designated A7 investment portfolio, currently valued at approximately $150,000. Distribution is conditional upon her providing this office with a certificate of completion obtained at her own expense for a court-approved parental education program, specifically one addressing the long-term impact of abandonment and emotional neglect on adolescent development." The air left the room. The clause was not malicious. It was forensic. It did not call her a bad mother. It outlined a specific deficiency and offered, not forgiveness, but a curriculum. It was a box neatly constructed with one very small, very humiliating door. Lydia stared at the lawyer. That is grotesque, she whispered, the words scraping out. He can't, that's not legal. It's coercion. The condition is legal, Miss Reed. Grayson said softly, unable to meet her eyes. The testator has wide discretion. The program is a matter of public record. You can choose to engage with it or not. The asset will remain in trust indefinitely. She turned to Alex, finally, truly seeing him. Not as the boy she'd left or the obstacle in her path, but as the quiet man in the chair who now held all the keys. She wasn't looking for money anymore. She was looking for an ally against the judgment, for a flicker of shared outrage, a son's loyalty to override this cold verdict. Alex held her gaze. He offered no smile, no frown, no apology. He simply was present, allowing the consequence to fill the space between them. He felt no urge to explain, to justify, to crow. The power was not a weapon in his hand. It was simply the ground he stood on, bequeathed to him. His victory was the utter absence of her leverage. Lydia stood. The movement was stiff. She did not look at the will again. She collected her purse, a simple, expensive act that seemed to take immense effort. Without a word, she walked out, the door side shut behind her. Later, in his uncle's library, his library now, Alex stood by the window. The legal machinery would turn, the assets would transfer, the conditional trust would be established. It was done. The hollowness was still there, but it had changed shape. It was no longer the void of abandonment. It was the vast, quiet chamber of a responsibility fully received. He had been seen, chosen, and entrusted. His mother had been given a choice, too, to be tutored in the basics of care she'd failed to provide, or to walk away from a sum just large enough to be an insult. Outside, the city lights began to flicker on in the dusk. He felt the weight of the deed in his pocket, the keys in his hand. The silence around him was no longer frightening. It was his to keep. And in the quiet he waited, not for peace, but to see what he would build inside it.